Bitcoin predictions 2023 to 2025. This is what the Bitcoin price chart could look like during this time specifically. All right, this is not financial or investment advice. I'm looking at the Bitcoin Astrology. I'm Jack, and I'm an engineer gone crypto astrologer and transformational coach. My mission is to help you grow your impact and income in the new financial, technological, and spiritual paradigm. So this is an intro Pluto analysis, not a full astrological analysis. Pluto plays a big part in the global markets, and I'll show you exactly examples of that. There's a lot more analysis to do in terms of all the other planets in astrology, not to mention technical analysis. But I'll be coming out with a brand new 8-week course to complete the Bitcoin astrology and technical analysis for Bitcoin 2023 to 2025. And the launch date is in August 2023. So definitely keep your ears open for that. And the last time Pluto transited 0 degrees, so Pluto is a planet that transits into new signs. So when it transits 0 degrees, it transfers into a new sign. And we just saw Pluto transit into Aquarius on March 23rd. That was very recently. And now it's actually going to retrograde back to 0 degrees Aquarius on June 11th. So this is very significant. I'll show you the last time this happened in 2008. Let me see if I can pull this chart up. All right, here we go. So as you can see here, Pluto transited 0 degrees Capricorn back in 2008 in March. Oh, shoot. That's not correct. That's 2023. This is when it's coming in right now. This is March 23rd where it's coming in. But let's look back at 2008. Let me go back here. And here we go. So January 2008, we saw Pluto transit to 0 degrees Capricorn. And then we had a few months here, many months, before Pluto retrograded back to 0 degrees Capricorn. So what we saw here was some pumping action. And then we saw this dump, and then the beginning of the major dump after Pluto retrograded to 0 degrees. All right, so keep that in mind. We're going to go into much more detail on that. And then once the retrograde, then it came back forward and transited 0 degrees one last time. Then we had one last major dump. This was the 2008 crash, guys. So this is why Pluto is so transformative, especially in the financial markets, especially when it's in Capricorn. And right now Pluto is retrograding back to Capricorn. It'll go back into Capricorn after June 11th, right here on this orange line. So we could see some major price action globally in the markets. We could see some major market shifts. But as you're seeing here, after March 23rd, we saw this pumping action. We could see another pump, but typically when Pluto goes retrograde and hits 0 degrees Aquarius and goes back into Capricorn, we could see some more dumping action. Let's go back to the slideshow. All right, so like I said, Pluto is transiting 0 degrees. It already did on March 23rd. Then it's going to go retrograde on June 11th and hit 0 degrees Aquarius. Then it's going to be back in Capricorn for about 7 months until January 21, where it finally comes back into 0 degrees Aquarius again. And then it retrogrades back on September 2nd again into Capricorn a second time, and then it finally transits to 0 degrees Aquarius again in November and stays in Aquarius for another 20 years. Very significant. All right, so another time Pluto transited 0 degrees 3 times. Okay, so let me go into so Pluto is going to transit here, like I said, so here we see it transits 0 degrees Aquarius one time, then it retrogrades, and then a second time retrogrades, and then a third time. So that's 3 times. But in 2008, it only transited 2 times. This time it's going to do it 3 times. It's going to ingress to 0 degrees Aquarius. So the last time it ingressed 3 times was actually 1956. I did a video on that in my past video. But then I looked even further back, and then in 1937 to 1939, it also ingressed 3 times into 0 degrees of that sign. So these are the specific dates that it ingressed into this 0 degrees. And then I looked at the Dow Jones. Since we don't have the history for Bitcoin going back this far, I looked at the Dow Jones, and typically Bitcoin follows the Dow Jones pretty closely historically. So I looked at the Dow Jones from 1937 to 1938. This is what we found. So we found a major dump before it ingressed into 0 degrees in 1937. Pluto ingressed to 0 degrees here. Then we saw a pump and then a dump. And then when it was retrograding back to 0 degrees was when we kind of saw this low here. So there's a pretty big dump there. And then we saw some choppy action, and then a final dump before Pluto started heading back to ingress 0 degrees a second time. And then it retrograded. We saw a lot of choppy action here. And then the final time, then we saw more pumping. And then I looked at another time. So a third time Pluto transited 0 degrees was 1912 to 1914. This is very interesting, guys. I don't know anyone else in the world who has found this information. All right, so let's compare 1956, 1937, and 1912. Because these are the last 3 times that Pluto ingressed 3 times into a new sign. And then we're looking at how the markets were affected by it. 1956, we saw it ingress 0 degrees the first time. We saw a pump right after, which is what we're seeing right now in the markets. And then when it ingressed or retrograded to 0 degrees, then we saw some big dump action. Then it recovered, big pump. Then it ingressed a second time. We saw a major dump. And then the retrograde, and then the final ingress into 0 degrees, and then the markets really recovered. This is 1937. We just looked at this action. Kind of similar, but I'll go into the analysis of the correlations that I found. But then 1912, similarly to 1956, we saw this pump and then a dump right when it retrograded to 0 degrees, which we're going to see on June 11th of this year. And then we saw this major dump here after this retrograde to 0 degrees. Then we saw the second ingress, and we saw a recovery, kind of similar to this one, then a dump, and it retrograded, and then we saw a pump and a final major dump, and then the markets recovered. All right, so kind of a recession sort of activity. So here's the correlations I found. All 3 times the markets pumped after Pluto ingressed to 0 degrees the first time and dumped when Pluto retrograded to 0 degrees. So that's what we're seeing right now in the markets today, right now. From March 23rd, we saw the Dow Jones pump. We're seeing a little bit of weakness right now, and Pluto's going to retrograde on June 11th. So could we see, if history repeats, could we see a dump when Pluto retrogrades to 0 degrees on June 11th through the summer? Other correlations, all 3 times, 1956, 1937, 1912, the markets dumped after Pluto retrograded to 0 degrees the first time, before Pluto ingresses to 0 degrees the second time. So let's look at that. All 3 markets dumped after Pluto retrograded to 0 degrees. Oh, yeah. So Pluto retrogrades to 0 degrees, the market's dumped, and then a pump. Same after Pluto retrograded, then we saw the dump and then the pump. After the retrograde, we saw this dump and then the pump. Okay, so all 3 times we saw that. So if history repeats, we will see a dump in the summer on the Dow Jones in the markets. All 3 times the markets pumped after the final Pluto ingress to 0 degrees. So here's the final ingress to 0 degrees here. We saw a major market recovery, major pump. Same here, we saw a major pump. Interesting that we did see another dump here. That was in 1937. But then this one, we saw this last final major dump, and then the market's fully recovered there. Looks like it's going into a bull market. So all 3 times, the market's pumped majorly. A little bit less in 1937, but they all pumped afterwards. All right, so compare it to now, what's happening right now. So we're seeing, similarly to all the last 3 times, we're seeing the markets pump after the first ingress to 0 degrees. Then we're seeing some choppy action here. Be very interesting what we're going to see in the rest of May and then into June 11th. And then if history repeats at some point, June, July, maybe even August, probably going to see some dumping action in the macro markets in the Dow Jones. All right, so just like all 3 times that we've reviewed here, the Dow Jones pumped after the Pluto ingress to 0 degrees the first time. That's what I was just talking about. Since March 23rd, we've seen pump action. So predictions, everyone's favorite part. This is not financial advice, but this is what I'm seeing with my astrology analysis based on Pluto. If history repeats, we could see a dump when Pluto retrogrades to 0 degrees on June 11th, 2023, or after that, or during the summer months. Then between June 11th and January 21st of next year, when Pluto ingresses to 0 degrees the second time, we could see a larger market dump in the Dow Jones and Bitcoin. So what am I planning on doing? I plan to buy during these major market dumps when there's probably going to be a lot of fear in the markets. So things to consider is price action largely depends on what the Fed decides. The Fed fund rates are going to be decided. The next the next hiking or pausing will be decided on June 14th. So if the Fed pauses, that's going to be very bullish for the markets, for the Dow Jones, for Bitcoin, for tech stocks. But if the Fed cuts, that's going to be actually extremely bearish. So what if the Fed decided to cut on June 14th? That would actually align very well with the hypothesis here that in the summer months we're going to see major dumps in the Dow Jones. Now, if the Fed could also hike rates, that could potentially, it could be bullish. It could, yeah, who knows? It could be bullish, it could be a little bearish. But definitely if the Fed pauses, that's typically bullish, especially for technology stocks. I have a past video that I made on that. So what do you guys think? What do you guys think of this analysis? What do you think is going to happen in the summer months? Please like and share this video. If you enjoyed this analysis, I'm putting out this free, amazing, high value content for free right now. So please support the channel. The best thing you can do is subscribe and get these videos out to more people so we can all prosper in this new paradigm, this new technological, even spiritual paradigm that we're heading into, that we can all become financially abundant so we can create a more sustainable world. Ideally, that is my vision, that we can come together, create decentralized communities around the world to create a sustainable future for ourselves and future generations. Okay, so let's use our crypto value to fuel this new paradigm to create, okay, this new earth that we know in our hearts is possible. All right, definitely subscribe to see more videos like this, and I'll talk to you very soon. Peace.